Hello and welcome to this Register webinar, Delivering Enterprise Scale AI Clouds with VAST and NVIDIA DGX SuperPOD, in which we'll be looking at the rapid increase in generative AI and HPC use cases across industries and sectors. It's compelling IT leaders to provision and scale high-performance infrastructure that's designed to support AI-powered business initiatives. And that means they've got to deliver the agility and scalability needed for a new wave of highly challenging machine learning and deep learning application workloads. These call for optimal specifications throughout the enterprise IT estate. And performance-optimized data storage systems and large-scale computing infrastructure are absolutely key to successful implementations. I'm your host, James Hayes, and I am joined today by two technology experts, namely John Mao, VP Global Business Development at VAST Data, and we also have Tony Pikaday, who's the Senior Director of Product Marketing, Artificial Intelligence Systems at NVIDIA. So we're going to be focusing on some key things about how VAST Data and NVIDIA are helping companies to prepare for and tap into the power of generative AI, the key IT infrastructure challenges faced as businesses race to prototype and deploy AI-powered apps into their business models, and how VAST Data and NVIDIA can take the guesswork out of their journey to AI solutions with validated DGX SuperPOD architectures. More about those good things, but first of all, John and Tony, welcome. Hello, can you hear me well?
Can.
Excellent. Good stuff. Now let's begin our conversation with some origins, some backgrounds to this. I wonder if, John, we could begin with you telling me a little bit more about the partnership between VAST Data and NVIDIA. How did that union come together? Where did the two companies realize that they had mutual strengths which they could build upon and bring to market?
Yeah, sure. Actually, many people may not know this, but the origins of the partnership go back to prior of the Mellanox acquisition by NVIDIA back to 2016. In fact, there's a lot of early on collaboration around something that was emerging at the time in the industry around new types of storage fabrics, namely NVMe over fabrics. And that collaboration was part of the reason why VAST was able to launch a brand new type of storage architecture, which we call DAYS, a year later, around 2017. And since that time, and post-acquisition, as part of now NVIDIA networking, both of our companies have been working on new AI initiatives and different kinds of innovations, things like joint reference solutions with NVIDIA DGX systems, such as their base pod. We've also worked on a number of different storage accelerators, such as Magnum IO with GPU direct storage, using industry standard protocols like NFS. And that leads us really to this week's news, which we're excited to announce that NVIDIA and VAST have now completed validation for DGX SuperPOD with our data platform as well. So
okay, so it's a full and rounded relationship. It's not based on one particular area or solutions, as you said there. Tony, let me turn to you. We're here to talk about AI and the fact that it's now such a driving force when it comes to organizing the fundamentals of IT infrastructural change. Can you tell me a little bit about how we got to this point and where we need to go from here to exploit the opportunities that AI and large language models seem to be offering us across the entire IT estate?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, here we are in 2023, and you can't go to a cocktail party or a coffee house without hearing someone talk about ChatGPT. And this really and truly is, in a lot of ways, becoming the iPhone moment for AI. There's been a lot of AI work, for the last decade, obviously, but things have really come to a crescendo late last year and into this year with the advent and the mainstreaming of this technology. And I think it's dawned on a lot of organizations how far-reaching the impact is. I've seen numbers that say that roughly 47 to 56% of human tasks could probably be impacted in a beneficial way by this. 80% of the U.S. workforce could see at least 10% of their work impacted by large language models. I've seen a stat says like 19% of workers will see 50% of their tasks impacted. So back in 2011, I think Mark Andreessen said something to the effect of software is eating the world. Well, now AI is essentially eating software. And it's incredible because for a lot of businesses, this is truly their iPhone or Nokia moment, depending on which side of the coin you're at. For many, it could become, depending on if they adapt and embrace kind of this new wave of technology. If they don't, it could be kind of an extinction level event, that we're looking at. You think about things like Grammarly as an example. It would have been unfathomable thinking about replicating what their software does. Now you can easily do that, or fairly close to it with ChatGPT, right? Think about text editing services, translation services is another. I recently heard someone say something to the effect of, every time I fire a linguist from my development team, my language models get better, because this kind of thing is powered by data, oceans of unstructured data that's readily available at the tips of every enterprise, no longer buried in the knowledge and experience of, a set of experts, but now literally the data is the expert, and it's being, offering enterprises a way to extract that, so many use cases. Accounting services, another one, right?
Yeah.
Programming, even code generation. You'd have companies that probably would have a developer write 50 lines of code a day, and with the advent of this technology with LLMs, they probably write 1,000 plus testing, plus commenting, plus documentation, all that, So it's huge in terms of the far-reaching effects. Every industry is seeing the benefits, and I think what's especially exciting today and why we're here is talking about how enterprises can embrace this iPhone moment and ready themselves and build the right platform and infrastructure to, infuse their business with it.
I think that's the key point you made at the end there. They've got to build the right infrastructure to make sure that they take full advantage of it. For a lot of the companies who are waking up to the opportunities that AI and generative AI can bring them, in some cases, it's their first exposure to AI. It's the first time they've actually tried and thought about incorporating it into their business plans. John, just very quickly, I wonder if you can give me some real-life examples of vertical sectors where this technology is going to find its greatest success, its greatest application, just so that we can sort of put it in context. What sort of vertical business sectors are going to be most interested in using this?
Yeah, I mean, like Tony said, I think AI is transforming the entire world. There's not a single vertical that doesn't have some kind of impact looming on the horizon as a result of this technology. Here at VAST, we've seen this firsthand across a couple of verticals specifically. Namely, if you think about healthcare, life science research, right? Mm-hmm. Just the advancements in drug discovery, right? And being able to do digital pathology, right? Over into manufacturing, into simulations, right? For new kinds of designs of material goods, even into things like weather forecasting, climate modeling, right? Seismic activity into the energy sector. I mean, it really is far reaching. And I like Tony said, I don't think, even in the consumer space, of course, there's a lot of direct, innovation happening there, but I don't see, I can't point to a single industry that won't be impacted in some shape or form in the very near future.
Now, Tony, I think all these different businesses, all these different verticals are going to be impacted, but are they going to approach this opportunity in the same way? Will we find that some users will want a fairly modest application of AI, whereas others will want to embrace it in a much deeper way? Perhaps you could just describe to us the kind of broad groups or constituencies of demand that you feel will emerge as we move forward into this AI-enabled future?
Yeah, it's a great point, James, because I think you'll see emerging kind of two very different kinds of organizations that look at AI with kind of different lenses and think about it relative to how their business operates and how much they want to infuse it into their business, right? So I kind of break it out like this. There are a lot of organizations that will simply benefit from subscribing to various services, and there's a whole ecosystem of services that are spawning out there that take, foundational AI work and then expose it as a service to organizations that want to access it through an API, right? And so that might be, image generation. It might be language capabilities like chatbots, customer service. It might be image recognition. It could be any number of things, anomaly detection. There's so many applications fueled by AI that could be presented as a software service to customers who simply want to subscribe. They could even potentially, with what's called prompt tuning, fine-tune some of these off-the-shelf services and customize them just a little bit to better align to the guardrails of what it is their business needs to do. And that there will be a large population of organizations that will work perfectly fine for. On the other side of the coin, there is a lot of businesses for whom this is existential, for whom they need AI to be part of their DNA. They want to infuse every aspect of the business from it, from optimizing supply chain to enhancing every customer experiences to keeping planes in the air. And essentially, there's those kind of organizations will look at this capability and say, this AI application is going to be built, on our specific business vocabulary, on, exabytes of, customer data, sensitive information. It's built on our brand. It's going to be something that we will need to keep very close to us. There's a trust factor. This is our intellectual property. And the rate of innovation happening in our space and the amount of iteration involved in these models to keep them current with our business, we simply need to keep these within the four walls of our data center. And for those folks, they will exclusively look at custom-built, grounds-up AI development, building what we call a foundational model versus getting one off the shelf. And I think for those who see this as foundational and need to custom build from ground up because it is existential to their business, they'll be looking for the right platform to get there.
They've got grand ambitions, but they're going to bring grand challenges as well. I mean, you've talked about rebuilding from the ground up. Can you perhaps give me one or two examples of the really big challenges that these ambitious organizations are going to have to tackle in order to make this work? Is it a matter of completely rebuilding their IT infrastructure to make sure that it's AI ready? What's the scale of the challenge that they're going to have to undertake?
Yeah, it is significant, and I think many organizations, unfortunately, might fall into the trap of believing that kind of the current IT platform, well, this is just another workload to execute on that platform. And oftentimes, especially these days, those who are cloud first and cloud only will feel that, well, I can just, do AI model training where I run other enterprise workloads. And unfortunately, AI places incredibly unique demands on IT infrastructure like you don't see anywhere else, unless you have a very deep set of experiences with high performance computing. AI, for instance, model training of large complex models like language models requires exactly the right design that perfectly balances compute, storage, network fabric together. You need to be able to parallelize a workload over many, many compute systems to achieve the fastest possible time to train a model, right? To deliver the highest accuracy on a model that's answering a business question. You need to have the right kind of network fabric that is exceptionally high performance and low latency to allow all those systems to communicate with each other. And you need, obviously, the right kind of storage. Data is the fuel of AI, and it's certainly the fuel of AI model training. And if you don't have the right kind of storage and the right kind of data fabric and the right kind of data pipeline, well, then you're probably not going to achieve speed from your accelerated computing resources. You'll have diminishing returns. And so these things need to be purposefully woven together in a way that allows you to run AI properly.
And reach an inequality of performance level that perhaps hadn't existed before. I wonder, John, if I could just very quickly ask you, in terms of storage, is this going to be quite a big shock for storage management? Because traditionally, storage has been a bit of a Cinderella in the data center context, it hasn't really had the same profile, the same prominence as networking and compute power has had traditionally. Slowly in recent times, people have realized the absolute importance of high performance storage. Do you think this change that we've been outlining here is almost going to reinvent storage and make it totally fit for purpose in an AI-enabled world?
Yeah, I think that there's like Tony said, there's a lot of change on the horizon for people that want to bring this capability in-house, right? It's, obviously on the hardware side of the equation, not many organizations are accustomed to even running GPU technologies, right? So like there's new hardware that's being injected, there's new software platform, there's of course the science of all of this behind all of this that is obviously going to be new as well. Even for organizations that have some history in kind of HPC and high performance computing, AI is a little bit different, right? And from a storage perspective, many of those workloads that were classic kind of HPC simulation were not as much about reading and accessing and ingesting vast amounts of data, pardon the pun. Whereas in AI, like Tony mentioned, it is about data is the fuel for a lot of these large language model training initiatives, and it's a very, very different thought process. And I think one of the traps we see a lot of people in our day-to-day fall into is people that have come from a legacy kind of classic HPC background, applying a lot of that same logic and saying, well, it should work then, it's just going to also work for AI. And that's not always the case for every single type of AI workload. So I think there is a new world to grok with by all the practitioners getting into the space. But this is, I think, part of the reason why companies like NVIDIA and VAST Data are trying to work together to make this a little bit more frictionless for those entering this space.
Okay, that's great. Let's zoom in a little bit, zero in a little bit on some of those challenges and points. I wonder if I can come to both of you, probably for Tony first of all. Can you, Tony, give us some examples of the specific storage and storage management needs that AI workloads will want and demand before they work optimally? As I say, what's the distinction between how storage has been managed in the past and how it will need to be provisioned and managed going forward in an AI-enabled environment? Just for our audience who are not sure of the distinctions here, what will storage need to deliver in order to meet this challenge?
Yeah, there's a couple things. I'll take my swing at it. I think John will also definitely give you his perspectives too, especially on the storage front. For AI model training, you need to have a platform that can allow effortless mobility of your data sets to where they need to be trained. You need to be able to ingest those data sets rapidly and basically feed them to the GPU complex with as low latency and as high speed and high bandwidth as possible, right? So when we think about it, we think about, for instance, the fabric that interconnects the data store with the compute infrastructure, right? So things like GPU to NIC to storage, how that data pipeline looks, being able to have incredibly fast reads from that storage to start a training run, and then being able to support frequent iteration on that. Those are characteristics that are super important for model training because of the size of the data sets that are involved. Essentially, if you don't have the right storage platform, you're going to see developers seeing elongated training run cycles, which means that these are people like data scientists who are highly paid to be able to iterate rapidly and experiment creatively with their models. And if they're held back because the storage subsystem can't keep up and can't bring that data into the cache of the computing system, well, then you're probably wasting a lot of money. You're probably elongating the ROI of an AI project in real terms. From a compute side of it, you need to be able to have a system that can parallelize a large complex model over many systems and shrink the time to compute. You need to have large onboard memory. You have to have the right network fabric. You need to have the right tooling even. I mean, a lot of people don't think about software, they think about purely GPUs, but you need to have the right developer software that enables them to enact a training flow, to orchestrate all these resources together and allow them to not have to worry about the complexities of infrastructure, but rather simply being able to point at a data set, point at a compute resource, and pair the two together and execute a job. These things need to all come together essentially. But you should, John, I'd love your perspective on the storage piece of it, because I think I didn't really do it justice, just to be honest.
No, I think you're right. I think the goal for us on the storage vendor side, right, is to make sure we're never in the way, right? And what I mean by that is we don't, like Tony said, we don't want to be the bottleneck where we're starving GPUs and they're running idle, right? These are relatively expensive machines and clusters, right? They're precious resources within organizations when there's lots and lots of different data scientists and researchers wanting access to them. Every minute, hour, spent waiting on a storage system to provide data to those machines is time lost, right? And so I think performance is definitely one of them. I think the other interesting things that we think about here at VAST Data are focused around things like scale, right? So scale across multiple dimensions. For example, as these models get larger and larger, and all of the complex things that Tony and team at NVIDIA are trying to solve on the compute side, it just increases the level of parallelism required from storage systems, right? So being able to scale to larger and larger compute clusters is also a very, very important thing, along with capacity, right? As these data sets grow in size and amass more and more data points that are fed into these AI machines, you need storage systems that can kind of linearly grow across both of those dimensions, right? Both from a performance and concurrency perspective, parallelism perspective, but also from a capacity perspective. And that's not an easy thing to do. It sounds a lot easier probably said than done. But that's where I think there are new emerging solutions like ours that are taking this type of challenge head on, whereas maybe legacy systems weren't really built for the challenges of modern AI.
And a new thing is also the storage has got to be optimized to be cost efficient and to drive value-added applications. I mean, are there opportunities coming up with this new AI-enabled world where organizations may be able to use the performance gains to find value from existing data assets that they didn't know was there? It's a bit of a holy grail that they've been chasing for years, is mining away into their data to find the hidden value. Are they actually going to break through this time?
It's funny, because if you go back over the last decades now, storage has always been viewed as something that was just, it needed to be reliable, obviously, right? Because it was there to store and save bits of information for as long as possible or as long as necessary by the business. And what we're finding now with all of these new innovative algorithms and these new techniques of how we can unlock new insights from data, we see a lot of organizations starting to rethink the value, the intrinsically kind of built-in value within their data. And unfortunately, there's going to be this kind of transformation that has to happen from a data perspective as well. Like organizations historically may be putting data on hard drives or even tape, right? For regulatory reasons, as a backup copy, maybe for compliance. We have a number of organizations that have started to rethink that strategy because, behind that 7+ years worth of data that they've accumulated over the years, they're starting to realize that if they can somehow tap into that data using some of the new techniques, that we've talked about earlier today, there might be new business insights they can unlock for the very first time. And so how do they reconcile between, this balance, right, of being able to store and retain data for kind of regulatory or compliance reasons or business practice reasons versus how do we make that data set now equally available to emerging scientists and researchers looking to do something with that data? And that requires a paradigm shift too in how they reassess the true value of storage within their organization.
Fascinating stuff. The idea of going back to old data and finding new value from it. I think this is a good point at which we can move on and focus a little bit on the technology that the two companies, the technology that VAST Data and NVIDIA are showcasing at the moment. I wonder if we can talk a little bit about, focus a little bit on the DGX SuperPOD architectures and benefits, and why this technology is so well designed to take advantage of these opportunities. you've already spoken, Tony, about the specific challenges that AI brings. Can you perhaps segue from that to telling us a little bit about how the technology is helping to meet those new requirements with its feature set and its functionality?
Yeah, absolutely. A great question. So, this relates to a lot of the journey of our own enterprise inside of NVIDIA. A lot of folks don't think of us as an enterprise, but we have a fairly large shop of tens of thousands of AI practitioners, a large portion of which are the most demanding AI developers out there. And we need to keep them happy. These are our own folks. They're doing high-end research, just like many enterprises are who are delving into AI, and we need to keep them busy. We need to be able to give them resources. We need to be able to allow them to run experiments, train models, and do all this effortlessly while orchestrating resources within our own IT and not bottlenecking the process. So we've had to figure this stuff out internally for ourselves, right? What does the right accelerated computing infrastructure look like? What does the right network fabric look like? How do we put all these things together with storage? How do we put the right tooling on top of that? And so we figured some things out along the way. And out of that was born essentially the SuperPOD architecture. And what we've realized is that to make this consumable for mainstream enterprise, we need to basically solutionize it in a way that is turnkey, that it is effortless to deploy. Because most organizations do not want to undertake the complexity of having stitched together this componentry and the elongated deployment timeframes that could be involved. Traditionally, if you're in academia, for instance, if you're trying to stand up a top 500 class supercomputer, you might spend 6 to 9 months putting that together. And so what we've tried to do is take the complexity, the time, and the operational complexity out of putting together your own supercomputer that can fuel your AI ambitions. That gave birth to SuperPOD. And so with SuperPOD, we've designed a system that architecturally we know can achieve the fastest time to solution on the world's most complex AI models, right? And delivered in a turnkey experience. So we're talking about customers who basically stand up their SuperPOD, with our help and the help of our ecosystem in weeks instead of like half a year, right? And that's really what SuperPOD is all about. Integrating NVIDIA DGX systems, our latest generation being the DGX H100, with the NVIDIA network fabric with certified storage, which we're proud to say VAST is part of that certified storage. We're very excited about the advent of VAST being certified for DGX SuperPOD. So now customers have a great solution that allows them to have this turnkey AI supercomputing data center they can deploy rapidly and start to reap the benefits, right? Build their own large language models in a fraction of the time that it used to take.
Excellent. John, is there anything you would add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we share a similar vision, right? Kind of building on the theme of making something turnkey. I think the ultimate goal here is to make this technology more accessible to organizations that may not have those decades of experience building supercomputers of their own, right? So from a storage perspective, we're very proud to take kind of a very similar approach, building very turnkey configurations that can work for any AI workload, regardless if you're just getting started versus if you're kind of pushing the limits and scaling with DGX SuperPOD. We have a technology and an architecture in our product that can meet customers wherever they are across that spectrum on their journey. So I think that's very important. The other thing that we're very proud of at VAST is that, of course, like we talked about earlier, there are definitely performance requirements in this new kind of infrastructure environment, right? At the same time, part of the reason why we've had so much success as a company is that we're complementing all of the performance needed for modern AI workloads with a new kind of simplicity that many organizations haven't found in the past, right? So being one of the first kind of enterprise NAS solutions in this space to give you obscene amounts of performance from a storage perspective, but a bunch of kind of table stake things that people have grown accustomed to from an enterprise NAS solution around availability, around uptime, around kind of like online upgrades and expansions, right? Things that, maybe in academia aren't as critical, but when you move into the mainstream enterprise, become mandatory. And so that's really, I think, our value add, if you will, here into this new market, kind of making this more democratized for people that can manage this in a simple way at scale with the performance that you need for these AI workloads.
John, I wonder if I could just ask you to expand a bit on your definition of simplified and simplification. I can see the appeal from an end user who's coming to this technology for the first time. When you say simplified, do you mean that you have refined interfaces to make it easier for non-specialists to use the technology, or easier for anybody to use the technology? What's simplification about?
Yeah, I mean, I think simplification for us is a couple of things, right? We're not, let's be very clear, we're not the first company to have invented high performance storage. There's a lot of great technologies out there that provide ample amounts of storage performance. That's not really what we're trying to claim here. I think that the performance that we want to bring to the table must obviously meet the needs of these intense workloads, but the simplicity angle comes down to how you manage the system, right? So you mentioned things like obviously a user interface. So for let's say, non-deep technical storage experts, there's a nice user interface, right? To be able to monitor and debug and understand exactly what's going on with the storage system through a web browser, right? But there's also architectural things that bring simplicity. Like, we're very proud of the fact that we're running at over 6 nines of availability and uptime globally across our install base. That's something that you'll be hard pressed to find in kind of classic HPC centers. But we think it's very, very important, right? Like we mentioned earlier, the kind of the uptime has a direct correlation to utilization of these new compute machines as well. So how you do things like upgrades and expansions, not easy tasks using kind of traditional HPC storage systems, but we take great strides and effort to make sure that's push button simple for operators. And, again, making, these are all things that are necessary in order to kind of democratize technology like this into people that historically haven't come from, classic academia or HPC backgrounds instead. So,
yeah. And Tony, AI workloads come in all kinds of data formats, all kinds of sizes. Can you tell me a little bit about what you can do to make to improve scalability for workloads, and to make sure that with all this great technology available, it's not being wasted, it's being used optimally across different workloads? Where does SuperPOD help there?
Yeah, I think it's especially important considering what John just said about, if you don't come from this space, you need something that's modular, and you need something that's scalable and push button simple. I love how he framed it, because prior to this, you'd have a team of engineers with a deep bench of expertise who didn't mind undertaking a science project of trying to build it, and then rebuild it, and then figure out how to scale it even more. But it'd be a lot of sweat equity and complexity involved. And with the advent of SuperPOD, and complemented with the VAST data platform, we're making this incredibly simpler. The modularity is incredible. The ability to effortlessly add compute nodes and have this linearly predictable performance that grows as you add capacity is hugely valuable. It takes all the guesswork of figuring out, okay, do I have to re-engineer my software stack? Do I have to change my network fabric? Do I have to make all these engineering fundamental changes just to get the next little bit of performance gain? No, SuperPOD with the VAST data platform eliminates all that, so that you can simply now reap the business benefits associated with having a platform like this.
Yep. Okay. Let's talk very quickly about business benefits, because we're moving towards the end of this webinar. But I think it's important to bring this point in. Clearly, all technology now has to have a strong business case behind it in order to get the interest, approval, and sponsorship from senior executive leadership. Can you tell me a little bit about how important this is with SuperPOD in terms of the thinking behind it, the design of the technology? How does it help identify cost efficiencies, payback, show that it can deliver very good return on investment. These are increasingly technical issues in a way because everything has to be cost justified. Perhaps, I'm not sure who's best placed to answer that question, maybe John, how SuperPOD helps support return on investment expectations from the people who hold the purse strings?
I might let Tony take this because I think we probably see the same thing here around things like, things like shadow AI, for example, taking hold, right? And as we kind of cross the chasm, I think the ROI is definitely something to consider from that perspective. But I think Tony might actually have better insight on this point.
You almost took the words right out of my mouth when you said shadow AI. And I want to double click on that a little bit, because if you think about, and we've probably been a little bit of the brokers of shadow AI over the last couple of years. Think about when we started DGX. A lot of the organizations buying DGX were essentially small developer teams that were well-funded and had access and simply needed a great compute platform, right? And that was done outside of the bounds of IT, without IT knowledge. And over the years, many enterprises are finding themselves with a sprawl of AI development silos that are completely outside of IT governance, and they're replicating infrastructure. They've got fragmented, siloed pools of expertise. Best practices are all over the place. And so now we see organizations in 2023 and even last year and the year before realizing that this is a problem. And in 2023, amidst turbulent conditions, do you want to be operating like this? Most organizations can't. And this is why I think we've seen SuperPOD incredibly escalating in demand, especially like last year and this year, because they're trying to solve this fundamental problem. How do I reap the AI benefits faster with lower cost? And the first thing you have to tackle if you're an enterprise is regain control of this. Regain control of this workload and build it on an IT platform that is centralized and consolidated. And when we give it a name, we think about AI Center of Excellence. That's what SuperPOD is, right? And so SuperPOD with the VAST data platform allows you to do three things really well that most enterprises might struggle with otherwise. One is consolidation of the silos. And when you do that, you're bringing together, first and foremost, expertise. You have a lot of data science talent, probably a lot of developer expertise in different pockets of your enterprise that are probably not talking to each other. Pooling that capability around a central platform, hugely valuable. It's also a great way to grow talent from within, especially when talent could be scarce. Second thing is best practices, learning how to scale a model from an idea to a prototype to a production model. You can harmonize and centralize that capability. And then third, utilizing your assets better, right? Improved operational efficiency and utilization of your infrastructure. That's a third benefit. So SuperPOD with the VAST data platform brings those together. So if you're a business leader listening to this, this is the way you can achieve the fastest ROI possible on your AI investment in 2023.
Great stuff. We're moving towards the very last minutes of this webinar. I just want to hand back to you both to give you an opportunity. Are there any closing messages, any points that, we've covered a huge amount of territory in this webinar, which has been great, but are there any closing points that you would both just like to quickly make in terms of bringing very sharp focus to the key points that our audience should be aware of?
I'll go first. I think the topics we've covered today are pretty maybe a little bit shocking and maybe a little bit scary for those getting started. But I think the important thing to understand is that it is still relatively early innings in this world of AI. It's moving very, very fast. And like Tony mentioned at the very beginning of this session, customers need to decide what type of investment they want to make. Do they want to be a consumer of AI technologies, or do they want to be an owner of AI technologies in a sense? For those who fall into the latter camp, I think there are now emerging solutions catering to those audiences to make this as seamless and turnkey as possible. The VAST has obviously been around for a number of years working in the space. We are obviously now very thrilled to be working in partnership with NVIDIA on things at scale like DGX SuperPOD. We provide, like I mentioned, the performance that's necessary for some of these AI workloads with a new approach and simplicity in terms of how you manage it. And I encourage anybody listening to this today to stay tuned to what VAST is working on as a company. We are, in fact, more than just fast storage, if you will. There's a lot of new capabilities that we're introducing and we've been teasing out over the last couple of months that are really focused on improving kind of the workflow experience for users with some new data services that we'll be announcing over the next couple of months. So we're super excited about it. We're thrilled to be working with Tony and team. And we're looking forward to hearing feedback from customers doing wonderful things in the world as we move forward into 2024 as well.
Great stuff. Tony, final word to you very quickly, if you can.
Yeah, we're super excited about the partnership with VAST. I'd say for organizations watching this, don't let this be your dinosaur versus asteroid moment. The great thing about this platform, this joint solution, as John mentioned, simplicity and performance, ease of use, easy scalability, all of these things that make this effortless for you to be able to tame large language models and generative AI this year. This is no longer has to be rocket science or academia. This can be something that any mainstream enterprise can now deploy and have if you recognize that this is existential to your business.
Excellent. A great summary there. Thank you very much for that, Tony. Okay, well, we've just about used up our time for this Register webinar. My thanks to John Mao at Vast Data and to Tony Picaday at NVIDIA. And thank you very much for sharing your expert perspective with our webinar audience today. We hope that you've learned plenty of things that will inform and guide conversations and decisions concerning your own AI and storage strategies. And so with that, until next time, thank you and goodbye.